So I've been working with the Azure Developer CLI, trying to make sure that the way I'm using it is the way it's supposed to be used. So one of the things about the Azure CLI is it comes with templates. So one of the templates is, let's see here, not that one. This one, you can clone it, you can open it up in code spaces, whatever you want to do. I have it opened in a local dev container. I've deployed it, and now I want to actually use it in my cloud native project because it has very similar items. It has an API and a web. It's only on containers. It doesn't use any other hosting that Azure provides. So I thought that would be pretty easy to pull together. So in order to be able to translate the elements of this project into my other project, I had to understand how it worked. So I took some notes about the way that the project works. This is the subfolder that I was most interested in making work, which was the client API. This particular project uses Create React App, but I use Vite, but it's almost the same. And the client actually needs the API URL backend. So that's kind of where I was going. How does the client get the backend URL in order to be built and used? So in order to understand how it gets that API, you kind of have to understand how AZD works on container apps. There's 3 steps. If you do AZD up, these 3 steps are done for you. But the 3 steps are packaging, provisioning, and deploying. And down here in the console, I've actually done AZD up here, starting here, and you can see it has package, then it has provision, then it has deploy. So what's going on in each of these steps? So in the package phase, it's actually running for the client, for the front end only, specifically, it's running the npm build, but it doesn't really have any of the environment variables such as the API backend at that point. And then it tags the client image, so you can sort of see it has actually tagged the 2 images it needs. So that's what's going on in the package step. In the provision step, this is where it's creating the resources. It creates the API first, and then it creates the web. And the web, if you look at the infrastructure for main, it's not explicitly tagged as a dependency. Let's see, where is it? So you could explicitly use the depends keyword here, depends on, and depend on this guy, but because it's already using the output of the API container, I don't have to make an explicit depends, it's implicit. So that's how the API is being provisioned first, and then the web is provisioned. And then let's see what else. It creates the registry in the container environment, but it doesn't actually create the container apps at provisioning. Again, it doesn't know what the environment variables are until after all the provisioning is complete. So once we're at this point, we get the .azure folder with all of our environment variables, and here are the client variables that we need in order to build the front end container. So at provisioning time, we get these as an output of the main bicep at the very bottom. So those sort of, they're spit out by bicep here, and then this is where you can actually see and use them locally. And then the last step is the deployment, and this is where the front-end client container is actually built. So it runs npm again, it creates the container, it pushes the container, and then the container actually starts with a script that uses the environment variables and inserts it into the front-end app. So this is where it gets kind of tricky, so I'm going to walk through that. Let's see, not infrastructure, not that guy. So if we walk in here, we have a Dockerfile which has a 2-step build. So this is the build where we're sort of messing with this script called entry.sh, and then we install all the dependencies and we build our front end. And the front end at this point still has no clue what the API URL is. And then we go on to our second layer, which is our Nginx, which is the guy that's going to do our reverse proxy. And again, we're copying over our entry.sh into our bin folder. We're copying over generated static files. And then we're doing something with Nginx. We open up our port, and then here's the bit where we're actually running this script and generating an env-config.js file. This is where all of our environment variables that we want for our front end are going to go. So let's go look at this entry point real quick. So the entry point gets our environment variables from print env, loops through them, and creates a file that's called env-config.js. And inside of that, we're adding these environment variables to the window. And let's see here. If we look at, if we look here, it's being loaded. That generated file that gets generated when the container starts up is being pulled in to the front end here. So we have not generated our static files with our API URL at all. That is not what is happening here, which may be very different for any front end you've ever built before. This is not how I've ever done it before. So let's go actually look at what is going on. So if we go over to the Azure portal, we can actually look at the files on that container. So let's go over here. Let's go to our front end container. You can see the container actually deployed. If we go down to console, we can connect to that container. And we have our entry point got copied over, and then our env got copied over as well. So if we cat our config, it has these three things that we, is it three? No, it's only two. Two things that we needed to make our front end work. We needed the URL for the API, and I guess we needed application insights as well, but this is the guy that makes the whole thing work. So I think it's pretty important to understand we're not using any hooks here that we could use in AZD. We're strictly getting the environment variables here at the point where the containers started. We have access to them. So when the containers started, we can run this file. This file does print env and loops through every single variable looking for the ones that start with React, and then creates this file. So this is definitely one way to get the AZD environment variables injected into your container so your front end knows where your back end is.